prosecution outlined how accounting practices
fuck?
of comic sections did not.
What kind of likeness is that?
If they were great artists, they'll be in a museum.
Evidence today may signal at least one.
I'm fucking fodder for cartoonists now.
Alrighty, and welcome back to Gutter Boys. While Gutter Boys is a... Yeah, sorry. You bring it in because you do that. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Gutter Boys is a small press comics podcast about the ins, the outs, the highs, and the lows of making comics. I'm your host, JB, with my co-host, Cam. On this episode, we are joined with Chicago's own Luke Schuler to talk about his comics, and he's going to be tabling at Chicago Zine Fest. If you missed the last episode, you should know that the next few main feeds will be people that are guests at Zine Fest. We'll be tabling there leading up to the show, so keep an eye out for that. We'll just be helping promote that event, and also the people that will be tabling there.
Yeah, we're very excited to be partnering with Chicago Zine Fest, and in the spirit of keeping things impartial, we will not be covering news on the next few episodes because we don't want our opinions muddying the waters of the Zine Fest. But also, more importantly, it's so we can get your money. So if you go to patreon.com/gutterboys or gutterboys.top, you can get bonus episodes, and we are moving all news coverage for the next 3 main feeds over to the premium feed there. So yeah, and we've got a special second episode of Real Boys with Drew B. Hall coming out next week. Can't believe it's been 6 weeks already. So yeah, if you want to support us, we've got almost 100 bonus episodes in the can over there, and we definitely appreciate anybody that's already over there, and you if you join.
Yes, the recent bonus episode features an interview with Avi of Silver Sprocket. We talk about their experience at San Diego Comic-Con, which was not last weekend, but the weekend before.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you want some insider insight into that event and what it was like being front row to experience the grandeur that is Caroline Cash accepting an Eisner Award, along with some other tidbits about the show and their experiences, go check that out. Gutterboys.top or patreon.com/gutterboys.
That's right. And, just to give you all a little something up front, we'll be doing some CZF coverage in the intro, so I decided for a prompt for this one that we each share one fond memory or good thing about CZF and our time tabling there in the past.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, here's what I'll say. CZF was the first show I've ever done, which is well documented on this show if you've listened to it over the years. But what I will say is it showed me what community could be because everybody kind of knew each other and supported each other. And it was my exposure to that. I was just hanging out with Blake every few weeks, and that was my exposure to like other people in comics. And CZF kind of just showed me, while it may not be like an ocean of small press, it's definitely a big lake that you can swim in.
Yeah, like one of the Great Lakes.
Yeah, a big ass lake.
Yeah. We should get the dog on the show. It seems like they really want to be on the show.
Yeah, no one's here to calm her down right now, so I got to deal with this till about 9 o'clock, which is the entire time we're recording today.
That's great.
Yeah,
You ready for a good time?
Yeah, I'll shut the door. I didn't shut the door because I wanted her to be able to come in here if she wanted to, but she just wants to look out the window. So,
yep, just bark at strangers.
Yep. All right. So yeah, do you have a memory or an anecdote you want to share about CZF?
Well, I want to say it was probably the last CZF that we did together.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good show. Got to hang out with old friends and meet some new people. God, I don't even remember what year that was.
Had to have been 2019.
2019.
Right before
Okay.
the pandemic, I feel
Damn.
like. Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, I don't know. Every Zine Fest in Chicago has been great. Chicago Zine Fest has always been one of my favorite shows.
Agreed. I will say this. Now, I'm sure the new building's going to be great, but I will miss the Plumbers Hall. That was kind of a cool spot.
Yeah, no, it's a great venue.
Yeah.
Very spacious. It is going to be weird being in a new location. I mean, it was kind of like that when I was at Cake last year.
Yeah, it was just a little different, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was a little, just, it felt off, but not in a bad way. Like, it was a great show. And the
just
venue
not what
was
you're used to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the stairs at the Plumbers Union because, like, they're so giant and huge. And when you walk up and down them, you're like, this is when they used to build things in this country.
Yeah. Yeah, you take Blake over and you start talking about your dad hand building all the brick by brick, the stones for the churches and the buildings, like you're Tony Soprano.
I guess another good memory was the time that I was driving and we told Dylan Drug Dog specifically not to roll the window down because right before he had rolled my back window down and it got stuck. So we had to like jimmy it back up and it was like a whole ordeal that took like 20 or 30 minutes. And then he saw somebody on the sidewalk as we're pulling out of the parking lot after just fixing it and instinctively rolled down the window and we had to do it all over again. That was
That's a classic Dylan move.
Yeah, and immediately, like, you could tell the second he rolled it down, like, his hands were up on his fucking head, like, oh, like...
Yeah, the human dog, Dylan.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess we should save some more of this juice for the next two. We got to squeeze this orange for all it's worth, baby.
Yeah, so, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll be joined with Luke Schuler, so stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
Indie Northern Kentucky, or INK, is the Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati area's only zine, alternative comic, and small press bookstore. Check out comics, books, and magazines from Razor Cake, Queer Kentucky, Silver Sprocket, Microcosm, and over 200 zines and comics on the consignment wall. For more information about how to sell your zines and comics available at INK, stop by indie.nky.com. That's indie, the letter N, KY.com. Visit us in Bellevue, Kentucky, and read what the cool kids are reading. Underground Kingdom Comics Presents Romance is the third issue of a new anthology showcasing the UK's most exciting small press cartoonists. This 28-page A5 comic features cover art by Vincent Bell Robertson and comics by Lily Blakely, Adam Fount, and Anna Redman, plus pinups from Kai Reynolds and Matt Greaves. Daredevils and Warriors wrote, "If you want to leave your comfort zone and are looking for thoughtful and original comics that have an edge without being edgy, then you should check out these UKC books." You can buy Underground Kingdom Comics Presents Romance now, along with the previous two issues, Horror and Crime, and Original Art, by backing our Kickstarter, which is live until Friday, March 15th. Don't be a cunt, buy a comic, innit? Hell yeah.
And now a few words from our sponsors, the Santos Sisters.
Si ocurre algún problema, no temas que enseguida las hermanas Santos aparecerán para salvar el día. Hey, con varias lanas, son dos hermanas, tan calientes que te matan con su encanto. Y los villanos, hagan lo que hagan, no son rivales para la hermana Santos. El mal con su magia, ellas detendrán. No importa el problema, en cualquier situación con ellas contarás. El crimen no tendrá donde esconderse, a plena vista solo son chicas normales. Pero cuando los problemas aparecen, son superheroínas muy sensuales. Santos, las hermanas Santos, como ellas no hay tantos dispuestos a luchar. Santos, las hermanas Santos, como ellas no hay tantos dispuestos a luchar.
Purchase your tracks today. Sid the Cat magazine is out now. If you've ever been to an amazing rock and roll show and thought, I wish I could experience this moment again, but in comic form, then Sid the Cat magazine is for you. Fiercely independent show promoters Sid the Cat have joined forces with comics journalist Andrew Greenstone to bring you an ongoing publication that documents the SoCal indie rock scene. This stunning 52-page full-color magazine features comics, articles, photos, and illustrations from a rotating cast of local illustrators and writers. It's a celebration of Sid's artists and venues and supports those keeping the bleeding edge of the indie music scene alive. Our first issue covers musical artists Big Thief, Illuminati Hotties, Mike Kroll, Fucked Up, Finn Lilly, Katie Kirby, Kate LeBon, Cursive, Christian Lee Hudson, No Win, and so many more. If you are a fan of comics, indie music, zines, rock reports, or community by the way of culture, order a copy now at sidthecat.com/sid-zine. Again, that's sidthecat.com/sid-zine.
Athenium Comic Art is an original art website for some of the best cartoonists in the business. They currently represent Remy Boydell, Marie Capelle-France, Nicole Gu, Jonathan Hill, Emma Hunsinger, Casey Nowak, Micah Song, and Tilly Walden. Athenium Comic Art gives fans the opportunity to own an original piece of art from their favorite comics and support the artists that they love. In their short time in business, they've already shipped many iconic pages out to hardcore fans across the globe. Don't miss out on your chance to own a one-of-a-kind piece of history. Check out their website, atheniumcomicart.com, and type in Gutter Gang at checkout to receive free shipping on your first order. Again, the website is atheniumcomicart.com, and the code is Gutter Gang.
Morning, Gary. Morning, Marianne. Need a menu? Nah, I'll just have the usual. You sure do love your eggs and coffee, Gary. Best way to start your morning, Marianne. Well, that and an issue of Town and County. What's that? Town and County is a new comic series written and drawn by cartoonist Alex Knoll. He's that guy that wrote them books about teaching and that Mr. Rogers feller. Oh, he was such a nice man. The first issue is 36 pages of black and white comic stories with beautiful color covers and features 6 stories about folks in our little township here in Illinois, like Susie Barber, the house cleaner that uncovers her client's dirty laundry, if you know what I mean, and Stanley Pepper, that big feller that just lost his job and took to drinking every night at Bugs's Tavern. Well, ain't that something? Town and County is published by Ivy Terrace Press, headquartered in Chicago. Chicago? Who would want to live there? So dirty. Each issue comes with a copy of the Hometown Hero, our little town's newsletter, and it's only $8. $8? Where can I get it, Gary? You can order a copy of Town and County on the internet at StoreEnvy/Alex Knoll Comics. Oh, there's your breakfast, Gary. Thanks, Marianne. Nothing like a cup of coffee and a good comic book.
Rust Belt Review is a quarterly comics lit magazine featuring serialized and short-form comics from some of the most exciting cartoonists in the small press scene today. Volume 1 features work from Gutter alums M.S. Harkness, Audra Stang, and Caleb Orecchio, along with work by Andrew Greenstone, Sean Knickerbocker, and Juan Jose Fernandez. You can order your copy of Rust Belt Review today by going to rustbeltreview.org. Enter in promo code GUTTER to receive $2 off your order. Again, that website is rustbeltreview.org, promo code GUTTER.
The Last Aviatrix is a post-nuclear adventure comic by independent, Los Angeles-based cartoonist Buster Cagle. The story follows Summer, our last aviatrix, who pilots the sole-surviving airplane, a nuclear-powered B-29. As she travels the ruined world finding ways to survive and help humanity, while dealing with the imminent threat of the Atom-born, a rare breed of atomic wizards that want to see her out of the sky, her mission becomes complicated when she accidentally picks up Henry, an Atom-born child who wields incredible power, and Clementine, a berserker on a quest for vengeance. Can our aviatrix survive this ruined and irradiated wasteland? Every issue can be read for free on bustercagle.com/comics. Paper copies can be ordered as well, but you can still read it for free. If you like wizards or warplanes, go check it out.
Now, back to our program.
Alrighty, and welcome back from the break. As I'm sure we've said on the intro, this is a very special episode in a partnership with Chicago Zine Fest 2024. Today, we have Chicago's own and an exhibitor from the festival, Luke Schuler. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going? Good to see you guys.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for coming.
Of course.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised it took this long to get you on the show, and that's on us. We just...
Oh, no, I love you guys. I'm happy to be here.
All right, good.
Yeah. To be fair, that's par for the course. We start saying, "Hey, we're going to get you on the show" about a year before, so you didn't even have to go through the process with this.
Okay, all right. I'll take the expedited route then.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, now since this is part of our CZF programming for the show, obviously, Luke, you plan on tabling at the show. This is not your first time tabling.
Correct. Yeah, this is maybe my third, I want to say.
Yeah, that sounds right.
At this specific show, yeah.
Yeah. But you do a bunch of other shows around the city too. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was when was your first time tabling at this show at CZF?
Oh man. It has been a while. I want to say maybe 2015 or 16.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Was there a reason why? Were you applying to get in and the luck didn't fall via the lottery, or were you just kind of laying low for a little bit?
Yeah, to be honest, I did a couple little shows around Chicago. I did an old art show called Token, which they had at Emporium here, which was a kind of video game focused one.
Oh yeah,
that was my first show ever. And
that was the show run by Eric and Christine. They ran Really Easy Press.
Mm-hmm.
They're now based out of Seattle.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a great show. I don't think it was my first show, but I do remember tabling very, very early on at that show.
Yeah.
At what was the bar?
It was Emporium in Logan.
Emporium. Yes, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good time. So that was actually my first experience with comics or tabling for comics, and then Zine Fest might have been my second show after that. Shortly after, and then I got into C2E2 from there and did a couple shows after that, like Emerald City and stuff like that.
Hell yeah! So I know you mentioned that you've been doing this for a while. Have there been any whether it be like the evolution of the festival or just changes for better or worse that you've seen with the Chicago Zine Fest specifically?
It was always one of my favorite shows.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think the people they get at that show is always really great. I'm biased. I'm from Chicago. I didn't grow up here, but I've lived in Chicago for better part of 15 years. And so a lot of great Chicago artists are there. A lot of, personal friends are there. And it's always just been a really great show. I think the vibe is good. The people who show up to it, I think, have a better understanding of what it is, maybe compared to like the Artist Alley and a Comic-Con, which is always nice.
Definitely. There is something that we always kind of talk about, like the difference between like a Zine Fest and a comic show. Do you have a preference on which one you do between the two?
Yeah, good question. To be honest, I do sort of enjoy the big shows, mostly in the sense that my work, I think, does a little better there. I have a lot of more pop culture-y stuff than maybe like the kind of personal diary comics or stuff that does a lot better at Zine Fest. So I think just personally it reaches a wider audience at like a C2E2 than it would at a Zine Fest. But Zine Fest just has that kind of community element to it that I really enjoy.
Hell yeah.
Now, Luke, I guess we should get into your comics or not.
Yeah.
It's really up to you. Ball's in your court.
Sure. Yeah. It's more comic singular than plural. I've kind of had
but there are more than one.
Yes,
issues.
There's plenty.
Yes.
I've I've had one series that I've kind of been slowly chipping away at for a really long time, and it's called Boss Nostalgic 64. It takes place in a 90s video game, and each chapter is kind of like a level of the game, and it's just slowly been unfolding. It technically started as a webcomic back in the kind of early 2010s, mid 2010s, and with the general idea that I would sort of put a page out a week, but the pages would kind of be connected and be telling a singular arc or singular story. But it allowed me, I guess, to have the odd page here and there that's completely non sequitur to what's happening. It just kind of let me have some freedom there to do that. The bad side of that, though, is that every page needed to kind of fit a lot of content in by, you hit the bottom right corner of it. So a lot of kind of punchlines need to be sort of set up in a way that they're either elongated or short or truncated to like perfectly fit into a page, which for better or worse definitely became a challenge in some cases, but worked out well for the format I was doing. So that, and it also is a little nice because I would kind of, when I was doing a page a week and then 50 weeks go by, I kind of can look at this nice pile behind me and see the progress I'm making, and that's helped me stay motivated. So yeah, I did chapter 1 a while ago, and then chapter 2 the year after that, and then I got hired at a place called Creepy Co. It was like a horror and Halloween e-commerce company, and I worked there pretty much since the beginning of the company, and was there for 6 years and kind of worked my way up to being a creative director there. So that sort of took up a lot of my time. And so comics, as much as I wanted to be working on it, and it was like kind of the top of my to-do list, it's kind of started falling down that list as time went on. And when I was suddenly unemployed recently, I thought, okay, well now's a great time to dive back in, finish up kind of where I left off on my comic, get the chapter I was working on done. And so I did that, put it all together into like a volume 1 of sorts, and then I had that come out at C2E2 earlier this year.
Yeah, and it looked really great in terms of the presentation of everything.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So I want to back up a little bit, though. So you said you were publishing this early in the 2010s. Were you doing this on Tumblr?
I was.
Okay.
Honestly, mostly just because Tumblr was one of the best places to have a kind of free webcomic website at the time. There was a lot of really great templates you could download that would have the kind of next and back button all kind of programmed in there, and like a random button and all that stuff. So honestly, it just worked really well as a webcomic website. Over time, I sort of built up one kind of from scratch on, I think, Wix or one of those other random sites to kind of house all this stuff now. But it definitely helped, A, having that format that was sort of built out in a really interesting way, and then B, it's on Tumblr, so it can be reshared and liked and passed around and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Definitely. Do you think that the differences between like Tumblr and I guess now would be Instagram? Instagram's kind of had like the chokehold on comics for almost a decade now. What do you think Instagram is missing that Tumblr didn't have? Because I do feel like there was more of an excitement behind comics on Tumblr.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to be honest, like Instagram used to kind of have that too, unfortunately. I think what I used to love about both was you could log in and just start scrolling, and it would be like a literal timeline. It'd be a chronological. There wouldn't be anything necessarily pushed to the top or bottom for, whoever paid the most or got the most engagement or whatever it may be. So it was kind of like a nice thing to be like, okay, I logged in at 3 p.m. It's 5 p.m. now. Let me see everything I missed on my feed. Just scroll down until I start recognizing stuff. And that was a nice way to gain visibility. Like your followers would actually see your stuff. And again, I think this was kind of the case on Instagram too. You could sort by recent, and I had that sort of set up by default. And I think once they realized how much money was kind of left on the table by just letting people sort of get to the top of people's pages for free organically, that became a little bit harder to navigate. So I think that romanticism about Tumblr is also a romanticism about the 2010s social media experience too.
Sure. It's so weird that like you can paint that with a nostalgia brush because it's been long enough, but it's been 15 years. It doesn't feel like that, but it's,
I hate hearing that, but you're exactly right.
Your work has been predominantly done digitally, is that right?
Correct, yeah. And that's mostly from an anxiety standpoint. It's just a lot easier for me to work through stuff when I know that I can control Z something.
Yeah.
When I can, a lot of times I'll like sort of maybe draw something out and it's perfect, but then it's just like 50% too big. So then I can just kind of grab that layer and scoot it around or move stuff around. I don't know if that's necessarily, that might spit in the face a little bit of the kind of the art of comics and kind of the quick and fast nature of like telling those kinds of stories. But for me, it's definitely helped me make stuff quicker and not overthink too much, I suppose.
Yeah, our friend Ramon is listening to this and fuming right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm the old school pro.
And I, to be honest, have a little bit of like an imposter syndrome with all this stuff too. Because, I was an animation major in college. I went to Columbia College in Chicago here. And, I loved animation. I wanted to work in animation. I wanted to, make Nicktoons my whole life. And growing up, my way to do that was to make comics. I would sort of make a comic of, what would essentially be a 21-minute episode of a cartoon that I was writing. And I think that's maybe seen in my stuff. Like my art is definitely feels maybe a little bit more like storyboards than it would like a comic page would unfold. And, for better or worse, that's just kind of how I've always been able to visualize a conversation or a fight scene or whatever it may be.
And since you've been working on this comic off and on since the early 2010s, I think, 2011 was when this comic started originally?
I mean, I was originally like drawing the first sketches of it in like 2010, but I probably didn't put my first page out until like 2013 or 14.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how much of it has changed, or at least in terms of as you were making it and you've noticed looking back, how much of that has changed?
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. It's honestly like I just put the volume out, so it's the first 3 chapters. So it was honestly very difficult to kind of put all this stuff together for me because I would look through that first chapter and I've gained a decade of experience since that first page, give or take. So it's kind of hard for me to look at that, knowing that that's someone's first page when they're reading this story too. I have kind of that fear that they're going to see that and be like, oh, and kind of build an opinion of it right away. But again, that's the nature of kind of this web comic, quote unquote, format of building the car while it's running, so to speak.
Right. And in terms of like making that jump from the story being purely a web comic to being a physical comic, what was that transition like and how did that change, if at all, your process?
I think I always knew I wanted to print it. I think the webcomic nature of it was just my way to share it as I was going and kind of motivate myself. I had a feeling if I was making, 50, 55 odd pages quietly at my desk for a year straight, that I would not be as motivated to keep going through it. But it was kind of nice to share it with people, get sort of live reactions to it from friends, fans, whoever, and again, kind of pivot on the fly if necessary. But, the nature of that definitely, like when I started writing chapter 2, I spent a lot more time outlining that stuff, thinking about the page count a lot more specifically, thinking, okay, like by 20 pages in of the first chapter, we were here. So like while I was writing it page by page, I was kind of like, okay, well, I need to speed this along or slow this down so that it kind of is in line with what I saw from the last chapter. So yeah, definitely a lot. It was my first and only like self-publishing experience. This most recent book is like, it's a perfect bound. It's like 150 something pages. So that was obviously a new experience for me. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting transition.
And when you made that jump, did you find the transition difficult in terms of thinking about what this would look like, not just as something that you interact with on a web page, but as like a physical object?
Definitely. To be honest, I think I more thought of them as a page of a comic that I was like putting online that you could read early than I was necessarily thinking about it as a web comic, like, you know, a traditional web comic artist would think of it as. There was a web comic in the early 2010s that was a kind of inspiration for this. I can't remember the artist or I think the original comic was VG Cats. It was like a game comic, like one of the billions of them back then. But what that artist did was they did kind of a offshoot comic called Super Effective, which was like a Pokemon comic. And it unfolded the same way as his typical comic did, but it was following the story of like the original Pokemon game from beginning to end. So like the first page was like making your character, and then the second page was picking your person, and then kind of unfolded the way the video game would have, but each sort of page was its own standalone punchline thing. And I really liked that idea, but I thought it would be a lot more fun to, you know, essentially make a video game up from scratch and tell it this way, as if like this was a game that existed in the 90s that everyone grew up loving, and I'm just making the comic about it.
Right. Okay, yeah, so that makes sense. Did you have the bulk of the story already kind of mapped out in your mind, or did you go chapter to chapter, and then how was that sort of drawn out? Were you scripting it out and then thumbing it, or how did that work?
Yeah, for the most part, it is all sort of mapped out and done. At least the whole outline is finished. It's 10 chapters total. I am 3 in at 10 years, so it's gonna, you know, I'm hoping it happens in my lifetime. But again, it's a nice little passion project that I'm taking advantage of the fact that it is self-published, so I'm not under any strict deadlines, and because of that, I can kind of take that time and spend a month just pouring over, okay, like, you know, for chapter 4, these beats need to happen. Here's the beginning and end, figuring all that stuff out, and then going page by page on like what each conversation will be like. And then when that's done, I'll thumb it all out in a notebook to kind of make sure it can all fit on all the pages and stuff like that. And then sit down and actually do the work from there. So that kind of pre-production phase definitely takes a long time. But again, I'm you know, genuinely taking advantage of the fact that I don't have a deadline, and it's just something I'm really enjoy doing. So I'm just gonna kind of make it the best I can and not rush it.
So you did bring up that, you know, you had the luxury of not, you know, having a deadline, and that's because you are self-publishing. Do you have any interest in pitching this stuff? Because, you know, I was looking at it and I feel like you could get picked up. That's just me, but
Yeah. Yes and no. It'd be nice to kind of branch this out and share it with people. It is, you know, again, a passion project, so sharing that with more people is great. And it is sort of, you know, a love letter to all the stuff we've been talking about for me personally. But I don't know, it's tricky because, for example, the second chapter is like the fire level, and it's like a Zelda dungeon. And the third chapter is the jungle level. It's like a Pokemon island. So I would definitely need to, like, there's no overt references to those things, but I do have a feeling if I'm under kind of a bigger, I guess, corporate umbrella, I'm going to need to essentially cut or replace or adapt so much of the story, which is essentially like, again, a love letter to all these certain games. Like some of the references might be shaving a little bit too close. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about.
This is why we need a Nintendo Power back to put comics in.
You can probably see a lot of those inspirations in here. You know, there's full pages that are like, when a new chapter starts, it'll say, you know, it'll have like a splash page of what the chapter looks like. It'll show on the map where it is, and it will have a bunch of game guide maps with like where the breakable walls are and where the treasure chests are hidden. And when a chapter's ending, there's like a high score screen on how well you did and all the stuff you unlocked and the multiplayer levels you unlocked and stuff like that. So I just like that kind of fun. Yeah, Nintendo Power is a good way to put it. I grew up. One of my favorite books growing up was the Bart Simpson Guide to Life.
Hell yeah!
If you know that, it's not a comic, but it kind of plays out like where every single page is like a completely different format, different layout, different everything.
Mm-hmm.
I pored over that thing when I was young. I just like wanted to kind of take in every little tiny detail, and I think that's that's like the trunk of the tree that like all of my sort of inspiration kind of comes from.
Hell yeah.
At any point, did you work on this comic on paper?
Yes. The first like half of the first chapter was like computer paper and ink. And again, this is 10 years ago. So, scanning it on my kind of crappy scanner and bringing that into Photoshop. And it was before I had like a tablet with a screen. I had like the old bamboo Wacom. So I was like drawing on my lap, looking at my computer screen, and that disconnect was just brutal. Yeah, I think I kind of would do that stuff, and I would look at the page when it was done, and again, like I'd be like, man, I just wish this character was. I don't know why, but I'm very critical and very like specific about how all the sort of details are, and if like one leg just is a little bit bigger than it should be, I think about that stuff. And maybe that's from my animation background and everything needing to be incredibly on model, and that sort of being like the driving force of how animation works, is everything sort of sticking to a very clean, like basically animating in 2D a 3D object. And so that doesn't always perfectly translate to comics, and it definitely makes them take a lot longer. That is a dragon I wrestle every day to be less critical and to, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you brought up animation there. So what's your background in that? I've seen things on your Instagram, but I didn't know you were like super involved with that. What's up with that?
Yeah, so I was an animation major in college, and technically I just wanted to work in animation. I wanted to make cartoons. So I found out at school that an animation major is more teaching you how to animate than how to work in animation. And I liked animating, but I sort of was realizing like this isn't really teaching me how to get any better at art. So I put in the effort to make essentially every elective class I had graphic novels and comics and character design and figure drawing and figure illustration and a bunch of stuff in the illustration department where, I met a lot of illustrators and artists that I'm very close friends with to this day, that I, will table with at some of these shows. And, I met my wife in the illustration department. So like, yeah, it was kind of where I learned how to draw, I guess, or learned how to draw better. And then when you graduate college with an animation degree, the sort of joke is you have to you're at the crossroad of either never animating again and staying where you are, or moving to Burbank. There's really it's tough to find a middle ground where you can kind of animate in Chicago, especially if you want to work on big production stuff. But I had a handful of friends who were my classmates in animation who went out to Burbank and are just absolutely killing it and doing the coolest stuff out there. But I was kind of at that crossroad, and I'm like, what, I think I'm going to stay here. And I put that energy into illustrating and comics and stuff. And so, yeah, it's a strange kind of like workaround to, like, again, I think my goal of working in animation was to do art for animation and not necessarily to animate. So I think it kind of maybe took me a little while to get back to that point that I think I always knew. But that was sort of my respect of animation, and I guess a lot of my training through college was because of that.
Did you go to college at Columbia? Am I mistaken there?
Yep. Nope. Columbia.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's, I guess, what brought you to Chicago, or am I wrong there?
Yes. So I grew up in the suburbs here, Crystal Lake, which is northwest suburbs. And so, yeah, I moved to Chicago for college back in 2009, which is 15 years ago now. It is crazy. So yeah, I've been here ever since. I love it.
Hell yeah. Crystal Lake. So I guess that's where the horror obsession started.
Yeah, that didn't hurt.
Yeah.
It's a little boring there compared to Camp Crystal Lake, but
Yeah. Hey, we're not going to let
Both
the
are
truth
great.
get in the way of a good story.
Oh yeah.
Well, going back to the topic of Zine Fests, were there any other Zine Fest shows that you've done other than Chicago?
Yeah, so the only other real big one outside of the city was Emerald City Comic-Con in Seattle. I did that a couple years, and then I know they have their kind of Monsters and Dames art book they do every year for charity, which is really great. And I was featured in that one of those years, which was really awesome. I had a great time in Seattle. It's a really, really cool city.
So you've done other shows, like comic shows. Have you explicitly done any other shows that are like just Zine Fests, the way Chicago Zine Fest is?
Honestly, not really. To be honest, most of the shows I've done are more of the kind of bigger pop culture Comic-Con stuff. But yeah, I mean, I tabled at C2E2 maybe 6 years now, minus a few for the pandemic in there. But yeah, I mean, and again, my career for a really long time was working more in like the kind of commercial art side of things, working, again, at a fun kind of small business that did a lot of cool, rad shit, but, more email art and social media management and stuff like that.
So you were able to get some more free time to yourself to work on your comics again. Do you have any plans on continuing your book, or is this kind of it for you?
I think it's that thing that will always be on my to-do list. It's just a matter of how close to the top it is. My goal, is to jump back in when I have some free time. I've kind of been spending some time outlining what the next chapter will how the next chapter will unfold, and getting all those ducks in a row. I've also just been doing a handful of other little projects when I can. One of I recently did this little quick dumb art series I did called Orphan Memories, which was like a handful of these drawings I did of like forgotten things from when you were growing up that you have not thought about in like 15 years. I tried to like think of as many of those as humanly possible, and I kind of built up a little art book of those that I will very likely have printed for Zine Fest coming up. But yeah, as far as Boss goes and the comic, that's just something I think I'll always work on if time lets me.
It's kind of surprising to hear that this is a story that you've been doing for as long as you have and have maintained interest in telling that story, because usually people get kind of worn out with their own work.
For sure. Yeah.
Do you see yourself ever wanting to tell like a new type of story or taking a different direction?
I do see myself doing that. I'm never opposed to something like that. I've definitely written some like fun horror stuff and spy stuff. Like I have a lot of other kind of interests that sort of align with it. But I think the beauty of this comic specifically is that because of the nature of it, because it is like kind of a webcomic and happens in this sort of video game kingdom place, I can sort of, any fun idea I have, I can just kind of pour into this one thing and just kind of keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger. I'll have a horror level in Boss that will let me make, a bunch of really fun, fucked up monster shit happen. And I can kind of get all of that out of my system for that chapter. And then, the space level is like a cyberpunk, Perfect Dark, Blade Runner kind of like stealth level. So I can kind of like do all the fun spy stuff there. So it sort of lets me, just the openness of the concept in the first place lets me kind of have that freedom at all.
Will there be an Elden Ring level where all your characters keep dying?
I'll make sure that's in there. I'll throw some bonfires in and all that too. Get everyone ready to go.
So I hate to ask this, but because obviously, like, you put so much work into your single book, but
do you work on comics outside of the stuff that you're, working on in this continuing story? Like, do you do anything else besides this one series?
As far as comics go specifically, no.
Okay.
I'll do maybe like a very quick diary comic here or there that I'll just kind of throw up on Instagram. But as far as like actually dedicating a bunch of time to something like that, I think I put that more into like more illustration stuff, kind of just fun little doodles that I'll sort of build up into, art books or prints or whatever that may, whatever would best benefit it.
Yeah. So one thing that I feel like you have going with your work is, and you've kind of hinted at it throughout the interview, is accessibility. And I feel like, you could pull in a customer. I hate to say a customer, but, if somebody's walking by, I feel like you have a lot of accessible items and things that people can relate to. So they're not, I guess, quote unquote, scared to take a risk on getting something.
For sure.
Now, as far as like, do you feel like, I hope I'm not insulting when I ask this, because I feel like your style is so unique that it makes it your own. But when you're actually, playing in this playground that you maybe not necessarily have designed completely yourself, do you feel like that's creatively limiting in any way?
I hear you. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I kind of mentioned earlier, like the imposter syndrome of this stuff. Again, I'm surrounded by all these super talented people who, are friends and peers and all that. And I never think to compare myself to any of that. And again, a lot of my sort of main focus is in more brand artwork stuff. So having appealing artwork is like part of my full-time job, is part of my career path. So yeah, I've come to terms with that, I guess. And what I've done is sort of use that energy and, make the shit that makes me happy, I suppose. Like, I think when it sort of dawned on me when I was younger that like, oh, you can just kind of draw whatever you want and print it out, and then it's just a thing you'll have forever. I really liked the idea that you can just kind of create something from scratch and it's there.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I know you talked about the job you had with Creepy Co. before. Are you still working in an art adjacent field right now?
Yeah. So I did some freelance for a company called Super 7. They do a lot of toys and action figures, fun stuff like that. So I did some cool packaging design for them. Can't say much more than that, but keep an eye out. And then if this is airing later, I guess I can say I got a new job this week at a place called Fangamer, which is, thank you, which is a sort of Creepy Co. adjacent e-commerce company that does a lot of really great apparel and home goods and stuff, but all video game related stuff. So definitely right in the middle of my sort of Venn diagram.
Now, because you've been working on this book for so long, have your influences for your work changed over the years?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think, again, it's tricky because it's a comic about a 90s video game. So the influences are not like the content that the comic's about is always going to kind of live in that decade or around that sort of genre of stuff. But yeah, as far as my own personal interests is, I mean, that's growing every day. Even just outside of like, growing up, I really was just only into kind of Sunday comics, Calvin and Hobbes and stuff like that, and have been able to kind of branch out from there. And just, again, seeing what my friends are doing, seeing what kind of the bigger stuff is happening out in the comic world, definitely inspired me a ton. Seeing different kind of animation projects, seeing different big movie budget TV shows and, insane anime and animated movies and stuff like that. There's just been a million things to be inspired by. I think, I think all that stuff kind of like melts together. And I think anyone would kind of say, any other artist would kind of say, like, whether they realize it or not, the more content you're soaking up, the more you're kind of latching onto that stuff, I suppose.
I do want to talk about like the divide between personal creating and then creating on the clock, because is that an issue for you? Because like, sometimes it's hard to get over that hurdle of like your job work being work, even though it is fun and you might be doing what you love. Do you find it like two different spaces to operate it in, and how do you work through that?
Yeah, 100%. I out of college worked retail, and then I'd work like second shift, so I'd be coming home at 9 p.m. and just the last thing you want to do is like sit at your computer and keep working, which is it's a tough thing. And when I started working from home, before my art job, I was like, okay, well now if I don't start this comic now, it's never going to happen, which was, it was true. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just kind of, at that time I was sort of working, I don't want to say more brainless job, but definitely not as creatively fulfilling job. And that sort of let me put all that kind of creative energy into my comic. But then when you start getting a creative job and you are sitting at a desk all day, kind of with the Photoshop file in front of you, it sort of goes back a little bit to that feeling of clocking out, coming home, having dinner, and then needing to go back in front of that same computer screen and keep chipping away at that stuff. So it has worked, I think, in the sense of like giving me that outlet, like all the dumb stuff I'll post on my Instagram is definitely like a really nice way for me to just kind of be like, I just want to draw something I don't have to think about, because everything else has so much thought put into it. And, the stakes are higher than just, my follower count, or the people who are watching my stories or retweeting me or whatever. So yeah, I think there's just a different kind of stress that comes from doing art for a career, like marketing art and stuff specifically. That's a very different side of the brain, I guess. And so yeah, I would always want to be working on my comic. I think it's just a matter of how far down the to-do list it had to get pushed to make sure all my main responsibilities were taken care of. And sometimes it was just a lot easier for me to do a little doodle that took 30 seconds and put that up and just have something to share with people and just like re-engage with the internet again, than it is to spend, what would be a whole week thumbnailing, writing, drawing, inking, coloring, and then posting a page of a comic.
For sure. Now, while we're talking about work, such fun things to talk about, though. I feel like a lot of people listen to our show and they look for like guidance and advice. So as far as like having a job in a creative field, do you have any advice on like how to get involved with that, whether that be like a personal anecdote or not, for someone that wants to, utilize their skill set as an artist and transition that into working for a career? Do you have any advice or any kind of things you can say about that?
Yeah, definitely. This is sort of, and this is a case for any industry, but it's worth reiterating. Like it's who you know. It's being a cool dude. Like people are going to want to work with people they like, and so if you're kind of making friends with people who are in creative fields, be friendly, be nice. Extend help when you can extend it. Learn from those people, and I had a buddy who I met because I was tabling at C2E2, Dave Sheet, who's a comic writer, and he knew the people at Creepy Coast, so I was friends with him. He shared that, my friends are looking for, some help at their company, and then that was how I found out about that, and then I applied to that. So, you never know. It can come from anywhere at any time. I hate to, like, be a boomer about it, and I hate that, this can be true sometimes, but, like, also sometimes just, like, nicely, non-intrusively DMing an artist and telling him, you think their shit is rad and keep it up, like, can maybe start a very small relationship with those kind of people. And again, when they may need help with something, I think they'd much rather work with someone they know makes good shit and is friendly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a line you can cross with that. Obviously, you don't want to like throw your resume at strangers.
It'll still happen.
It will. And, again, I don't want to be, that's the sort of boomer mentality of like, well, did you shake their hand and, ask for a job? The world doesn't really work like that. I do just think genuinely though, and this is just a good karmic way to live your life, but like just be chill and cool. Like that has worked in the very specific area that I'm working in, which is like commercial art. If that's the kind of route you want to go, obviously, you know, it's going to be a very different story if you're making like some rad punk zine about like all that shit. So
yeah. And I think if you are working within that scene, it's kind of assumed you already know that. To not be a weirdo. You're probably not even going to be reaching out to people and sending them your resume.
Right.
Of like, yeah, I did these zines about how cool Crass is. There's 20 of them.
Right.
So you should hire me. You know, like that's just not a thing in most circles of the punk scene. So
yeah, like it sucks to kind of have to like talk about the, you know, very businessy side of this part of art, but you know, it is a thing. It exists.
Yeah. Well, and also it's like, it's kind of wild to me that there is like a very clear subset of people who actually need to be taught how to talk to other people. And it's, you would think that that's just assumed. Right. Like just don't be weird. Doesn't seem very complicated, but
you know, we, for better or worse, we, you know, you guys are my age, you know, early 30s, mid 30s, whatever. You know, I had the privilege of growing up like with no social media. I got a Facebook senior year of high school, and then I started like using Instagram and Twitter and stuff like pretty much when I was, you know, in the middle of college or out of it. So, you know, that can be a good thing and a bad thing, but I do think that established a little bit of like a communication focus and a friendliness and like a eye-to-eye sort of way of talking to people that's sort of hard to teach, especially when, you know, I kind of feel for these kids who are graduating right now and essentially went through 4 years of college, you know, at home or, you know, behind a computer screen because of how crazy the last 4 years have been. So, you know, sometimes it's no one's fault, but, you know, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's one of the few things where I am fully a boomer on.
Yeah.
It's just like, don't be fucking weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
If you don't know how to engage with people without being weird, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
yeah. Take a breath
go
and
to the
learn.
library and take some social courses.
Get a therapist. Like, I don't fucking know, you know?
Yeah. No, it is very boomer, but I mean, like in this industry, in any kind of artistic industry, whether it be film, music, you know, comics, whatever, it is all networking, man. And you could be the best artist in the world, but I mean, if you're just making pages and just silent and not showing anybody, you know, so there really is, like, I do feel bad, especially as like more and more diagnoses come down about all these like different social disorders and so forth. But I mean, like, unfortunately, it just is what it is, and there's no way around it. Like, I hate to be that way.
It's true.
But you got to play the game or learn how to play it.
Yeah. And then, you know, like people like me, like I'm working in an environment where I'm having to communicate my art decisions to, and sometimes like licenses and stuff.
Right.
That's a whole different conversation to have. But yeah, it's sort of a weird, tricky way to think about all this stuff. It feels against what you're doing, but at the same time,
sucks. Like, it sucks playing the game.
Yeah. It's the nature of the beast. You know, you just have to kind of accept it and make the most of it.
Yep.
And you know, it's rewarding. It's cool to do. Like I made like Goosebumps art, and I made like and then I met Tim Jacobus, the artist who did Goosebumps, at a show once.
Gnarly.
And it's like I'm just such a, you know, huge fan, and I love your stuff. And I mentioned like, oh, you know, I work here and I did this and this and this, and he was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I love you guys and blah blah blah. Like, it's really cool. It's really cool to like do this stuff. But yeah, just don't be a weird asshole.
Hell yeah. You know, I hate that to pull the lid off of it and reveal it, but what are you working on right now? Like, and what will you have at CZF as well?
Yeah, so honestly, like I mentioned, I just started a job. It's my first day is Monday, so that will be my immediate focus. On the other side of things, you know, I will, as always, be chipping away at Boss, and you can kind of keep an eye on the website for that. Keep an eye on my socials. I'm, doing a lot of just random dumb art for fun. And then that Zine Fest, I'll have my new books. I know I just did a book signing at Challengers in Chicago, so I have a few books there too. If you're in Chicago and want to check it out, also have my shop. You can grab stuff there. But yeah, as far as Zine Fest goes, I mentioned I'm working on a little art series called Orphan Memories. I'm going to compile, I did like 100 of those, so I'm going to compile that into a little art book, and I'll very likely premiere that at Zine Fest.
Hell yeah. We did get a listener question from friend of the show, Nick Forker, and he wants to know, Luke, how many people have you met?
Oh boy, okay. Let's break this down here.
Me and JB, that's 2.
Okay, so my first grade class was like 30 kids. Second, yeah, okay. I think maybe 420, 69-ish.
That's right. That's right.
Around that.
Hell yeah.
And what's the name of your favorite cat?
Fictional or the one cat that I have in my life?
Yes.
Yes, it is our cat Usagi, named after Sailor Moon. She is turning 9 in October, and she's great.
Oh, an old lady.
Mm-hmm. She's the best.
Yeah, Usagi's a good cat. Well, since we covered the important stuff like your cat, I think we can take it home.
Agreed.
Where can people find you online if they want to check out more of your work, buy your books, keep updated on what you're working on, etc.?
Yeah, my handle is Lukos Picture House, Lukos Picture House. It's pretty much that on every platform except Twitter. Twitter, it's Lukos PH because Elon won't let me make longer handles, and that's mean. But you could just Google Luke Schuler, Schuler. You'll find me. Post art when I can. Staying busy. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Find me in Chicago. I'm hanging out.
All right. Well, Luke, we appreciate you stopping by, and we're looking forward to seeing you at CZF this year. Everybody go check out Luke's work online and stop by his table. And as always, we appreciate you being here with us, and stay gutter.